everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alex and today I'm going to be doing a review of Stephen King's 11/22/63. Weighing in at a whopping 842 pages, this was my Goliath this month and I slayed it. Barely. Just to let you know, I'm going to be doing a spoiler-free section of this video and then one that has spoilers, and thanks to a recommendation by one of my subscribers, Medium John Silver, I'm going to be changing the background up. So this is the background for the spoiler-free section. The spoiler section will be in front of my floating bookshelves. To give you a brief taste of what this book is about, this is the story of Jake Epping, who is an English teacher in the year 2011, and he gets roped into the biggest challenge of his life. His friend Al, who owns a local diner, calls him up with a seemingly impossible request, and that is to save JFK from being assassinated. To do this, he's going to have to enter an invisible portal that always opens to the same day and time, and that is September 9th, 1958 at 11:58 a.m. And that kicks off the first part of this review, which is the rules of time travel. In my humble opinion, in order for a time travel mechanic to be compelling, there has to be strict rules set forth by the author. So without any spoilers, the rules are as follows. 1. The portal always opens to September 9th, 1958 at 11:58 a.m. Rule number 2 is you can bring anything from the past into the future, but you cannot retrieve anything you've left in the past. Rule number 3 is every time you re-enter the past, it erases every previous change you've made, so you can see where we're going with that. Rule number 4 is the past does not wish to be changed, so the more you attempt to change it, the harder it's going to fight you. And rule number 5 is regardless of how much time has been spent in the past, every time somebody travels back to the present in 2011, only 2 minutes has passed. So theoretically, someone could age 1, 5, 10, 20 years in the past and return to the present and it'd only be 2 minutes later. Which I think is freaking cool. These rules were awesome. They were unique. They were compelling. I really felt like they had stakes. I give props to King for coming up with a unique time travel mechanic. The rules cause you to want to ask questions about, where did this portal come from? Why are the rules the way that they are? And I can tell you by the end that some of the questions will be answered, but not all of them, and I personally think that that's for the best because it leaves some mystery. And for those of you who are fans of It, I have good news for you because there is a crossover. Somebody online ended up making the map of like how every single Stephen King book was related and how all of them take place in the same universe. I haven't read all of King's books. I can't confirm or deny, but I can tell you that these two books definitely do. And I was definitely fangirling when I got to see some of my old friends again, so I was really happy to return to Derry. Now, unfortunately, with 11/22/63, there are parts in the middle that drag, and given how big this book is, the middle is most of the book. Now, I'm not saying that the story wasn't interesting or that it wasn't well written, because it absolutely was, but you have to keep in mind that the last book that I read of King's was Under the Dome. And this book is both bigger than 11/22/63 and faster paced. This book only takes place over the course of, I think it was like a week, 2 weeks at most. 11/22/63 takes place over 5 years. So when I tell you that I felt like more things should have happened in here than they did, I think you could probably see why. If he can write over 1,000 pages of what happens in 1 week. Part of that is also because this is a first-person narrative. So Under the Dome, we get the perspectives of so many different people in the town. It's written in third person. We get to hear their thoughts, their motivations. In this is written from Jake's perspective to us as the reader, like he's writing to us to tell us his story. So I feel like that probably played the biggest part in why not only it slowed down in certain parts, but maybe why I didn't like this quite as much, because I like getting to hear what all of the different characters think and feel. I don't necessarily want to only hear from just one person. It really depends on how it's written. And Jake was fine. I liked him as a character, but he wasn't my favorite. Much of this story, rather than being focused on, Lee Harvey Oswald and the JFK assassination, is actually focused on Jake's relationship with a young woman named Sadie, who he's falling in love with. And the romance is really, in my opinion, what creates the greatest amount of tension for Jake, because of course he can't tell Sadie his real identity, because how do you tell somebody that you're from the future without sounding like you're insane? Admittedly, about halfway through the book, I started wishing that this wasn't a romance at all and that King had written it in a different way, and I started thinking of several different ways that he could have written this. Some examples could be Jake could have made a friend in the past that he confided in, and the two of them worked together to try to keep Kennedy from being assassinated. Or maybe Jake ended up traveling into the past with a friend from 2011, and they both work together to try to find some sort of solution. The tension could be created by maybe they have different ideas about what the best plan is. Maybe one of them goes horribly awry and it ends in tragedy. Maybe between Jake and this other character, one of them ends up falling in love with the past and wants to stay there while the other one wants to return to the future. There's so many things that you can do that do not revolve around a love story. Now, I will say by the end of the book, I understood why King decided to make it partially a romance. I went from thinking that the romance was like a sweet but unnecessary element in the story to honestly it pulling at my heartstrings. The last couple sentences in this book, they really got me. I'm amazed that I didn't cry. On a completely non-romance note, King's decision to have the portal open in 1958 when the assassination didn't take place until 63 could be good or bad depending on how you like your story structured. The good is Jake has to spend more time in the past. He has to kind of settle there. He has to make a life, make friends, fall in love. There is a lot of character building that happens during that time, which I think King is extraordinary at. That's one of my favorite parts of his writing, is how he builds characters. The bad side of it, though, is if you're looking for some sort of high-octane, action-packed, thrill-seeking fun time, I would argue that this book probably isn't for you. Because I read Under the Dome and because I loved it so much, I was almost annoyed at how slow-paced this was, and that's really the fault of me. I don't necessarily think that's the fault of the book, because many people absolutely love this story. If I had read this before I read Under the Dome, I actually think my opinion of it probably would have been higher. And I've never felt this way before about a King book, but I genuinely think that this could have been shortened a little bit, that some parts of it could have been cut out because they were just a little too unnecessary. Not a whole lot. I'm not talking about like major chunks of the story, but enough to make it under 800 pages. If you enjoy books where the tension is built slowly, where you and the character know that they're gonna have to act at exactly the right place at exactly the right time, or this entire house of cards is gonna come crumbling down, well, then you may love 11/22/63. Just as long as you know that you will be reading the phrases "the past harmonizes" and "the obdurate past" more than you ever cared to in your life, and it will probably annoy you by the very end. At least it did for me. Overall, I give this about a 4-star. I liked it. I can recommend it with the caveats that I've mentioned. And if you would be so kind, please go ahead and exit the video if you do not wish to hear any spoilers, because I'm gonna give some major ones in 3, 2, 1. And welcome to the spoiler section. I can assume if you're still here that you've either already read 11/22/63 or you just don't give a damn about spoilers, but either way, here we go. First off, I just want to say that I really appreciate that King did not make this one of those time travel books where two versions of Jake could both be trying to save the president. Like, the past is not looping back in on itself the way that it does with like time turners and Harry Potter. With the way that he set up the time travel rules, he made sure that that was never going to be possible, and he also ensured that we as the reader, we know this is pretty much the only shot that Jake gets to get this right. Especially if it's always going to take him 5 years between the time that he enters the portal and the time of JFK's assassination. There's only so many times he's going to be able to go through all of that. He's just going to get old. So, great choice on King's part. It created stakes. There was a quote on page 553 that really got me thinking about Sadie's place in this whole narrative, and that quote was, "I might find reasons to keep on waiting. The best was beside me in this bed, long, lovely, and smoothly naked. Maybe she was just another trap laid by the obdurate past, but that didn't matter. because I loved her. And I really did start thinking at that point that Sadie was some sort of trap. The perfect example, of course, is the night that Walker was set to be shot at by Lee Harvey Oswald. Jake was going to go try to find out if Oswald was the lone gunman, but instead he had to go save Sadie's life from her ex-husband, and that was the night that she was cut up and her face got mutilated. So then I started thinking, well, if Sadie was attacked because she was with Jake, because the past was trying to keep him from finding out about Oswald, then maybe if Jake never interfered, then the unaltered past would just leave Sadie alone. Well, we come to find out that that's not true, because we jump all the way to the end of the book when Jake is looking up Sadie, and we end up finding out that she was still attacked by her husband regardless, and her life was still saved. And I started thinking that this was very strange, because in the newspaper article that was written in the unaltered past of Jody, it says that Deke and Sadie's other friend, Miss Ellis, were notified that her ex-husband was some sort of threat. But in our version, the Jake version, he was the one who told them. So if Jake didn't interfere, who warned them that her ex-husband could have been a threat, and so that they showed up just in time to save her life? Maybe that was some of the residue, if you will, that was left over that the green card man told Jake about. That, you know, every time you go back into the past, yes, it is mostly erased, but there's some sort of residue that is left over. I don't know. I thought that was kind of strange. I was really glad that she survived, but I felt like that ending could have been a little bit different. On the note of the card men, because I brought them up, I made a prediction at the beginning of the book that Jake was going to end up becoming one of them, and I was really glad that he didn't, because I felt like that would have been too obvious. I thought that they were cool, like the mystery behind who are they, where do they come from, what time period, who's training these people, how do they age, and I'm also wondering if they show up in some of King's other works again, because this takes place in the same universe as Derry and It. They have to probably show up somewhere else, right? Which leads me into my next question of, did he write other sci-fi novels, like books that are just sci-fi? I would not count 11/22/63 as being horror in any way. This is more sci-fi thriller. And this was very unique in that way because most of King's other works that I've read have either been horror or like horror dark fantasy. I mean, you could argue that Under the Dome is kind of sci-fi, but to a much lesser degree. So let me know down in the comments, did he write any other just straight-laced sci-fi books that I should know about? Because I want to read them if he did. There is one other spoiler that I want to talk about before I end this video, and that is my least favorite trope of all time showed up in this book, and I was not happy about it, and that is amnesia. Amnesia is one of the cheapest and easiest ways to make your character basically down to the wire, and you're just waiting for their memory to be jogged so they can go and do whatever the hell it is that they need to accomplish. Does our main character need to accomplish the main plot of the book, which is saving the President of the United States? Let's have him bludgeoned by a mob instead and have him suffer brain damage so he can't remember why he's here. And the way that it was resolved is a perfect example of why it was cheap, because what did he have to do in order to get his memory back? He had to go to the safety deposit box and read Al's notes. And all of a sudden, all of his memories just come flooding back to him, or at least the ones that were important. The only example that I have of amnesia being done in a unique way that I also found fun was the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, because not only was it in a way that was completely different than anything I've ever seen before, but it also had a supernatural bent to it. That book was just, it was leagues different than the way that it was handled in here. Anyway, all of my gripes and compliments aside, I did give this, as I said, about 4 stars. I can recommend it to people. I thought it was a solid book. If you have read this before, please let me know down in the comments. And if you haven't, let me know if you are still interested in reading it after hearing my review. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, that you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.